Welcome. In this breakout room, Richard Wakeman, the Chief Architect for Cybersecurity of Aerospace and Defense at Microsoft, will speak on Microsoft solutions that are made specifically for CMMC, how Microsoft's government cloud works, and the leading cybersecurity strategies that help achieve compliance. Richard specializes in the defense industrial base, adopting cloud services from Microsoft. Richard engages with Microsoft partners and customers end-to-end to drive adoption of Azure Government, Microsoft 365, GCC High, DoD, and Dynamics 365 GCC High as solutions within the Microsoft US Sovereign Cloud. Thanks for joining us today, Richard.
Hey, good afternoon. Yeah, thanks for having me here today. This is an exciting opportunity for us to recap on several of our CMMC acceleration capabilities, as well as a couple of recent announcements that we're very excited about. Just a quick word about the team that I work on here at Microsoft. So as the chief architect of our aerospace and defense team, we focus exclusively on the defense industrial base, including any of those commercial companies and entities such as federally funded research and development, and other federal contractors that have unique compliance requirements that ultimately lead them into our government cloud offering. So we have been focused on, for example, the cybersecurity maturity model certification, as well as export controlled data, that would be ITAR and EAR. But without further ado, let's dive right into the presentation today. So we'll have a quick overview of our Microsoft cloud offerings, including our government cloud offerings that have the unique characteristics to help you accelerate your path to CMMC compliance. Then we'll also discuss our CMMC acceleration and a number of the capabilities that we have of our platform that enable us to work with both our partners and with our customers for being able to achieve certification on all three levels of CMMC as it's released. And part of that is our product placemat for CMMC and its more detailed component of technical reference guide for CMMC. And then as part of our big announcement that we have here recently is around cross-cloud collaboration, which has been one of the top topics that we've had. So I decided to include that in the content here today. So getting into our cloud offerings for the DIB, I've done a number of different webinars and blogs that would illustrate in much more depth in terms of what our cloud offerings are and the very individual characteristics such as FedRAMP and the cloud computing SRG. I invite you to go to my blogs that include the understanding compliance between Microsoft 365 commercial, government, and DoD offerings. With a couple 100,000 views, it is something of a reference that many people have chosen to get familiar with in terms of making that decision. Should I go into commercial? Should I go into GCC or GCC High? If you look at the various cloud offerings that we have, along the time continuum, we had an engagement with the U.S. Department of Defense in terms of meeting their very restrictive requirements with the Cloud Computing Security Requirements Guide, which is the SRG. And we built a true sovereign cloud for the U.S. Department of Defense, purpose-built to protect controlled unclassified information. That would include CUI specified for categories such as export controlled data. That would be ITAR and EAR, for example. And of course, a U.S. person's requirement for managing our cloud services in this sovereign cloud. And its alignment with FedRAMP High that we have in correlation with the SRG Impact Level 5. It began with a deployment of Azure Government. That was specifically for infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. Also gave us a foundation to build our productivity suite. So we released approximately 8 years ago Office 365 DoD, which is in the same environment as Azure Government, and have since also released a number of additional products and capabilities such as Dynamics 365 DoD. Now, there is one unique requirement around the DISA SRG Impact Level 5, in that they have a very restrictive network with ultimately a firewall that prohibits anyone but DoD entities to be able to have tenants and subscriptions within the DoD environment. So to be able to accommodate the defense industrial base and other non-DoD entities such as federal cabinet level agencies, FBI, DOJ, DHS, et cetera, we have a twin environment of the DoD, which is now branded Microsoft 365 GCC High. GCC High initially was branded with that high moniker to illustrate or indicate that it was for FedRAMP High. I will say that now we've got FedRAMP High across all of our cloud service offerings. So that really is not the specific differentiator. What is the alignment with export controlled data as well as the SRG. Now, because it is a twin environment to the DoD, the GCC High environment does have equivalency with SRG Impact Level 5. Many folks, though, inside of the DIB and other federal agencies would look for Impact Level 4 equivalency. So you can both achieve each one of the SRG levels from 2 to 5 within our US sovereign cloud to include Microsoft 365 GCC High and specifically Office 365 Productivity Suite and all of our security capabilities such as Defender and Purview, Entra, and Priva are all now hosted within this environment. So we refer to this as the US sovereign cloud. It is a fully physically and virtually segmented environment from our commercial side. And as I mentioned, it was purpose-built to protect controlled and classified information. You will see that Azure Government, which is the infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, provides that platform and foundation for both the GCC High and DoD clouds. So, for example, when we talk about collaboration and B2B capabilities, those are all same cloud between GCC High and DoD. Now, to look at additional offerings that are available for the defense industrial base, we do have our GCC environment. This dates back nearly a decade to where we did a carve out of our commercial side environment. It's predominantly has state and local government and federal civilian agencies in there, also available to the DIB. As it sits on top of the Azure commercial as its platform and foundation, we are able to meet, for example, FedRAMP High accreditation as well as DFAR 7012. However, we do not meet the requirements for export controlled data and most of the CUI specified categories of data. And the reason for that is that it does share common components with Azure Commercial that is a global infrastructure that gives you a lot of opportunity, for example, to peer into it from a global perspective and to have multi-geo capabilities of Azure and pairing it with the productivity suite, which would reside in GCC. And we do oftentimes refer to that as a FedRAMP moderate, even though it's a FedRAMP high environment, as that is the specific requirement that you have for DFARS 7012 with the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation that many of you have a flow down in your contracts. So if we look at this from a purely compliance perspective, this will look familiar if you've seen my blog, is that we can focus in on FedRAMP, which is at a FedRAMP high impact level across all our clouds. So we do check the checkbox, if you will, for the DFARS 7012 requirement to have a cloud service provider that is FedRAMP moderate or equivalent. So we do exceed that across all of our platforms. But let's take a look even closer at the specific DFARS 7012 in terms of being able to meet the subparagraphs C through G. that include additional logging, forensics, and incident reporting that we only have a commitment for in our government clouds. So you'll see that that is specific for GCC, GCC High, and DoD. Oftentimes, it's a pretty binary decision in terms of deciding which cloud you go into. In that commercial, especially with the productivity suite, we do not have comprehensive coverage for DFAR 7012 C through G, which for many would eliminate the choice of using commercial for compliance with CMMC level 2 and 3. But it is a decision that each customer makes. It's a risk decision, et cetera, in terms of how much federal contract information or controlled and classified information that you may have. So now if we differentiate between GCC and GCC High, it is around having a sovereign cloud versus a commercial cloud. In our sovereign cloud, as I mentioned before, it is specifically a US only CONUS-based network and set of data centers that are managed by screened US persons. In fact, we have full US citizenship checks and clearances for the personnel in our data center. So if you pick up the phone and you call support, even if you're routed to a foreign national for some reason, they're a subject matter expert for a specific product, it does give you the option in GCC High to say, I would like to have a US person in a US location service my support incident, in which case that is possible in GCC. And that gives us the ability to do a contractual obligation with an amendment that allows you to have an ITAR commitment from Microsoft. So for international trade and arms regulation, that it gives you a commitment from us that is a shared scope of responsibility to say that you may host ITAR information in our GCC High cloud. Whereas if you look at GCC, we do have a definitive no for ITAR, in that at least on the cloud platform on the back end, the Microsoft scope of responsibility for compliance, we cannot assure that you would have a US person. For example, with a support incident that you will be routed to follow the sun support model, and then in the commercial platform to include GCC. So for those of you that do not have export control data such as ITAR and EAR, it is a consideration that you could select GCC and get compliant with CMMC levels 1 and 2. I'd also like to point out that we have additional enclaves that we built for our government environment to extend, as I mentioned, commercial and Azure government, the US sovereign cloud here, gave us a great opportunity to really refine our approach to delivering sovereign clouds that we were able to replicate in terms of providing additional US sovereign clouds that have even more restrictive requirements, such as our secret and top secret. There are air-gapped clouds. So if we focus in on Azure Secret, it is authorized by the DoD with a cloud computing SRG impact level 6. So that is for protection of secret collateral, as well as special access programs with collateral secret. We have achieved authorization with our partner community and to include the DCSA National Industrial Security Program. So we're super excited about being able to provide contractor-owned, contractor-operated subscriptions in the air-gapped environment. Those would be ones that would be actually subscriptions owned by the Defense Industrial Base for internal research and development, IRAD, and other use cases, in which case that you would be able to provide an environment that is fully air-gapped and meets those specific requirements, such as DAPM for the National Industrial Security Program. We also have Azure Top Secret, which gets into primarily the intelligence community. I always do like to point out this is a shared responsibility model in terms of looking at it from a customer and Microsoft perspective. You can inherit a number of controls from Microsoft, but the vast majority of the controls, especially for NIST 800-171, include a shared scope of responsibility in terms of looking at what you can inherit from Microsoft, but also have a responsibility for you to configure or operate or monitor the environment that you have deployed within the Microsoft cloud. As you can see, if you look from left to right here, that if it's on-prem, of course, you own 100% of the compliance. That would be end-to-end from physical security all the way through data classification and accountability. The shortest putt that you'll have is with software as a service, naturally with Office 365, the productivity suite, and Dynamics 365. You get to inherit most of the physical security host infrastructure network controls from Microsoft, especially for cloud native environments. In terms of looking at what is your responsibility or what you can defer to your managed service provider as well, is around providing access to your enclave environment. That would be setting up access control, assigning users that may be able to be invited into your environment, whether they're your employees or guest users that are coming from your supply chain. And of course, protecting data, applying information protection, data loss prevention, et cetera, to your information, and of course, personnel control, et cetera. With a combination of configuration across both Microsoft and your organization responsibility, you're able to achieve nearly 86 controls of NIST 800-171 with a cloud native environment in Microsoft. The remainder of those controls would be things like training your, having a plan, et cetera, for more personnel and policy and procedure that would ultimately complement how you've deployed into the cloud service offering. So let's dive into Microsoft CMMC acceleration. There are a couple of blogs that I have that are now recently updated for CMMC acceleration. Most notably, there's the Microsoft CMMC acceleration update for August 2023. Big announcement there is that we've now incorporated in support for CMMC level 3. Long time coming. We've been a little apprehensive in terms of jumping the gun on getting a release of that because we still haven't learned what the specific controls of NIST 800-172 will be bundled together with CMMC level 3. So we just decided to include them all. So you have the full spectrum of the NIST 800-172 controls now within our product placemat, technical reference guide, et cetera, which we'll dive into here. Big part of it is the CMMC acceleration, of course, providing you those government cloud offerings that begin with, of course, FedRAMP high certifications that we have for our baseline implementation across all of our clouds to include NIST Special Publication 853, now updated to Rev 5. So you have that ability to inherit or what many of the folks have referred to as reciprocity with Microsoft's certification that you have. And ultimately with the cloud computing SRG as well, impact level 4, as I mentioned, we do have equivalency with level 4 and level 5 in our GCC high environment. And of course, meeting the DFAR 7012 specific requirements, especially with subparagraph C through G. Microsoft CMMC acceleration is around how you can establish that program of reciprocity to inherit from Microsoft so that you can shorten the putt that it takes for you to reach compliance, especially around CMMC level 2. But we do include, as I mentioned, all levels, levels 1 for basic cybersecurity hygiene, all the way up to a level 3 now to include the NIST 800-172 controls. We do recommend for those that are looking at a long-term home for your enterprise tenant, that you would use that combination of Azure Government and Microsoft 365 GCC High, as it has a full coverage of controlled and classified information to include both CUI Basic and CUI Specified. The U.S. persons requirement. It's not required. You can actually meet NIST 800-171 controls in our commercial side environment, including the GCC. But in this particular case, we've really had a focus more on GCC High, as that's also predominantly where most of the defense industrial base prime contractors reside as well. We've worked with our partner community. That would include managed service providers, managed security service providers, to build solutions on our platform that provide you with scaffolding. That could be enclaves that are stood up quickly at a low cost, especially for being able to do meet-me tenants and extranet type scenarios, all the way to a full enterprise tenant that you can host your business within, even to include your commercial business and government business within our government clouds. Many of our partners have also released reference architectures, especially with, like, for example, CyberSheath, including the ability to stand up an environment for you that is CMMC ready in terms of meeting, the 80 or controls that are configurable with the Microsoft platform. Microsoft is a platform of choice for CMMC version 2. As you have maybe seen here recently, Microsoft ourselves have gone through the Joint Surveillance Program and have been able to achieve a certification for the CMMC level 2, which today, it's until CMMC law is and rule is in place, it is still a DIBCAC high certification that will have ultimately a equivalency or reciprocity for CMMC level 2 in the future. And that's with our Microsoft mission engineering as well as our Microsoft federal business. So you can count us into the defense industrial base in terms of many of the contracts that we either prime or are sub to. We also are a cloud service provider, as you can imagine, that provides you the government cloud offerings. And, through our consulting services, we have even system integrator capabilities. So we have the full spectrum across CMMC for assistance with our customers and working very closely with our partner communities such as CyberSheath. In our mission cloud, as I enumerated before, we have Azure Government, US Sovereign Cloud, and the secret and top secret, and a complete cloud in terms of not only providing you with email and file sharing and Teams, the productivity suite with Office 365. We also have its pairing with infrastructure as a service and platform as a service in Azure. And we have and are now the largest security provider on the planet with a full spectrum of security capabilities, spanning from endpoint detection and response with EDR on the endpoint to management of servers and endpoints. Our full Defender suite, our Purview suite for compliance, etc. And we have DevOps and SecOps that help you to automate your security posture within your environment. Oftentimes we refer to this as SCIM, which is our security, compliance, identity, and management. That is the product group that we have that ultimately owns Defender and Purview, etc., within Microsoft. And it provides a platform layer across all of our services and is multi-cloud and hybrid, which means that not only can you protect the data that would be hosted within Microsoft's cloud, but that can extend to on-premises as well as to multi-cloud to other cloud service providers. So our SCIM, our security capabilities, are pervasive in terms of helping you achieve CMMC compliance, not just for Office 365, but across your entire enterprise. We have, as I mentioned, the Microsoft 365, as well as Dynamics 365 with our enterprise resource planning and customer responsibility, our CRM. And here recently, we've also introduced even reference architectures for you to be able to leverage Azure Open AI and our large language model for being able to access the data that is within your government GCC High environment. So look at that across the spectrum. It has the end-to-end coverage for endpoints. So it include not just Windows, but also Mac OS, Linux, even mobile devices, iOS and Android, in terms of both management of those devices and securing and having policies applied and EDR capabilities, as well as email. Many of you will start your journey by adopting Office 365 and migrating your email into and being able to take advantage of our email hygiene capabilities with Office Defender. And identity management. You may have seen here recently, we have updated our branding for our identity management platform to be called Entra. So Azure Active Directory is now Entra ID, and it includes the ability to manage the identity across your entire enterprise, to include enforcing policies such as multi-factor authentication, compliant device attestation, location awareness, et cetera, and accessing Office 365 and applications that you have running on premises and in the cloud. So from a bigger picture, that is where we've got the layers of the SCIM, as I had mentioned before, with security, compliance, identity, and management of your environment. One last slide of a bit of the marketing, get this out of the way, is that we've got the ability to be able to fortify your data with an integrated approach. It's a real differentiator for Microsoft. In the past and best of breed, you may have had to do a lot of the integration yourself between various different security and EDR products. With Microsoft, you have a full spectrum of coverage that would include information protection, such as identifying CUI, labeling it and encrypting it so that only authorized users such as US persons can access it. And of course, data loss prevention that would include protecting data from data exfiltration, such as removing the data from the environment and keeping protection in case it does leave the enclave. And not to mention, not to forget about, I should say, insider risk management. So with IRM, we got the ability to understand the user intent and context around sensitive data. And that is to identify the most critical risk, right? So it does begin oftentimes with insider risk management to make sure that you have your data protected and your crown jewels, not only safe and compliant within your enclave, but also making sure that both users, internal and external to your organization, have access to only the appropriate information and prohibit data exfiltration. Let's dive into the CMMC acceleration update. I do have an extensive blog that covers each one of these components. So today we're going to focus in on the two that have been updated here recently. We're super excited about this. It's been over a year and a half in the works of our partnership with Kuzara to update this CMMC acceleration for the product placemat, as well as the technical reference guide. They're now refreshed to include, of course, a lot of the new branding that we have around Defender and Purview and Entra. It also now includes the NIST 872 controls, which are the high watermark for compliance for the defense industrial base working with the U.S. Department of Defense. And that is a combination of the CMMC level 2 controls, which correlates to NIST 800-171, but also level 3 controls with 172. So to look at our product placemat for CMMC, it appears to be like a periodic table where you've got each of the columns is a family of the NIST 800-171 controls, where you've got a list of each one of the controls that you can drill down into and how each control may be mapped for that shared scope of responsibility. In some cases, you get to inherit the full controls, and I'll give you a demo here in just a moment. In other cases, it's shared, where you would have some portion that would be provided to you by some Microsoft capability, whether it's Entra ID, formerly Azure Active Directory, and conditional access policies, and Intune device management may all contribute to you demonstrating compliance with a specific control. It also gives you an opportunity to compare and contrast the different SKUs that we have across, for example, Microsoft 365 G5 versus G3 controls, and how those may help you satisfy the full spectrum of the 110 controls, or even more advanced with level 3 controls. Each one of the practices that you can drill down into will give you a description of the practice, as well as a customer implementation guidance statement. And here you can see, for example, what is the intent of the control, as well as if you have a shared scope of responsibility, that you would be able to implement, for example, certain capabilities of the platform to help you demonstrate compliance with that specific control. Let me just jump here out of the presentation, and I will bring up the product placemat for view here in a live demo. So if you drill in here, you can see that there are a number of controls that are identified. There's a drop down here in step 2 where you've got the level. Of course, for level 1 and basic cybersecurity hygiene, or the foundational level, if you will, there's 17 controls. If we drop down and select level 2, now you'll see all the controls for NIST 800-171 light up with all 110 controls. And if we select level 3, now you'll also see it light up with those additional NIST 800-172 controls. Now, by default, if you look at the services that are specified over here in the left-hand column, they're all turned off for the most part here, with the exception of the ones that are default without selecting a specific SKU. And you'll see that there are these controls lit up, especially around physical protection, configuration management, that you get to fully inherit from Microsoft in a cloud-native environment. So let's go here and drill down and say, let's select the full Microsoft 365 E5 suite. And now you can see where we're able to help in the shared scope of responsibility satisfy. And if I scroll down here, many of the controls, primary service, there's over 107 controls with a combination of 171 and 172. So primary services within Microsoft equate to nearly 74% of the controls. Secondary services, another 25. So it is very comprehensive coverage across the spectrum. Let's go back though and look at level 2, since many of you would only have a level 2 requirement. And you can see the 86 controls that you can have near full coverage in this shared scope of responsibility, leveraging products from Microsoft that would include everything from the cloud service offering itself to individual services. Now, if we drill down into a very specific control, one of the first things that you'll see when I double click on, for example, 3.1.1 is that the left-hand column of services now change in terms of which one are highlighted in blue and yellow. If it's highlighted in blue, it's a primary service. If it's highlighted in yellow, it is a secondary service, meaning that they contribute to your compliance. The secondary services, in some cases, embellish and go beyond what would be required in some cases. But at the end of the day, you can see all the services that help to contribute to you demonstrating compliance with 3.1.1. That's Azure Active Directory, now Entra ID. That would include role-based access control, conditional access policies, privileged identity management, customer lockbox, etc. And if we drill down, you can see a description of that as well as the customer implementation guidance. So the product placement is super useful for a very high level, call it the level 100, of mapping the Microsoft products and services that we have to how you demonstrate compliance in a more graphically friendly user interface that you can drill down into. It's become very popular, and many of the organizations that we've worked with, especially going through joint surveillance or through DIBCAC high certification process, that have leveraged the product placement in conjunction with their partners to our partners to be able to demonstrate compliance and achieve, in many cases, 110 score on their assessment. Now, one of the challenges that we had with the product placement is built-in Excel. Nice thing is it's a fully contained file that you can download and be able to reference. But it is Excel. It didn't really give us much of an opportunity to do rich text and deep links, such as being able to give you a much more comprehensive discussion around each one of the capabilities. You can see here, like the customer implementation guidance, just plain text. So as a result, we did a Word document version of the product placemat that is called the Technical Reference Guide. Now, the Technical Reference Guide is, as it's in Word, a much more verbose deliverable that we worked with Kuzara again on, to be able to drill down into each of the 110 controls plus the 172 controls for level 3 that give you deep links into it. So some of it is replicated from the product placemat. As you can see, this information here around assessment objectives, the primary services and the secondary services, they're assigned to the specific control or practice. But now you can see the rich content, right? We can drill down into what is Azure Active Directory, Federation services, role-based access control, etc. Privileged identity management, one of the most popular features. I believe it's even to the point of being a requirement. It's a primary function that would help you to demonstrate how you protect administrative rights that you have assigned to the service. So with privileged identity management, for example, you're able to say that no one has standing administrative rights within your tenant, with the exception of a lock and key account that nobody really uses unless something happens to your tenant and you need to open up the safe and access it. But in the case of most day-to-day users, you can elevate their permissions, for example, to become an email or Exchange online administrator through privileged identity management, in which case it would be assigned to them and allocated a very specific amount of time that you would enable that elevated privilege. And then it can be approved through personnel that are authorized to monitor the environment, as well as to revoke and have full monitoring, auditing, and incident response attestation, etc. So privileged identity management, of course, just highlighting that as one of the most popular features that have been released. Of course, baseline, the first thing you'd ask is, have you implemented multi-factor authentication, right? Is that enforced not only across your Office 365, but even applications, right? You have the ability to now have multi-factor authentication that can be layered in on top of other cloud applications or on-premises applications. They're all authenticated with Entra ID and enforced multi-factor authentication even with levels of assurance, such as not just a Microsoft Authenticator app or SMS text messages, but also smart card authentication, such as PIV-CAC, what we call certificate-based authentication, derived credentials, may all be specified as the level of MFA required to access an application. And then conditional access policies that really drive into, for example, enforcing things like device attestation, right? If a device is going to access content in your service, you need to ensure that that device meets the NIST 800-171 controls, so that it, for example, that it's FIPS 140-2 compliant encryption, so that it can access controlled unclassified information. So I encourage you to download both the product placemat and the technical reference guide to get a really good level 100, level 200 view of how you would implement and deploy Microsoft Cloud services. And you say, okay, Richard, well, that's level 100, level 200. How do we go to level 300? Well, that's through our partner community. So our partners have enclaves and deployments, even in many cases, infrastructure as a service to help you deploy an environment and to manage it, and even manage services, right, that would take advantage of our platform to help you even go beyond Microsoft to that additional layer of level of protections from experienced ISVs that are ultimately familiar with CMMC Level 2 intimately. So let's go back into the presentation here. And I wanted to hit on, before we wrap up for today, the most recent updates. It's been one of the most well-received updates that we've had now for Microsoft 365 GCC High in particular, is our ability to do cross-cloud collaboration. So yeah, thank you for the applause. It has been a long time coming. I do empathize for many of you that have had challenges deploying into GCC High and only able to collaborate within same cloud with other GCC High customers. Now we have the ability for you to collaborate pretty much anywhere, including commercial side. So in terms of looking at just the Microsoft Cloud, it is the ability to do cross-cloud collaboration, organization to organization, such as between GCC High and the DoD Cloud, as well as GCC High and worldwide commercial cloud. As you know, GCC is part of the commercial cloud. So yes, you can collaborate between GCC and GCC High. You can't collaborate between our sovereign cloud to include, for example, the US sovereign cloud does not have the federation in place with our China cloud for obvious reasons. This includes collaboration across the full spectrum of our collaboration products. So it would be, of course, email and calendar and secure email, SharePoint and OneDrive, sharing and co-editing. We have a public preview, which is just so excited about coming online here, and that came online on July 31st for Teams, to be able to include guest accounts that are cross-cloud. And it also includes applications that you may host through Entra ID as well. So if we drill down into the specific collaboration, we've had classic collaboration that would include the ability to host team meetings that can include participants from anywhere. Also for chat, right? We've had the ability to do chat between commercial and Gov Cloud for several years now. And that is presence. So lighting up the jelly bean, as I call it, that's your red, green, yellow indicator for your availability. And we've also had the ability to do file sharing and co-authoring, albeit it was through a one-time passcode, which was not favored by many, as you would look for more controls like conditional access that is afforded to you through Azure AD or Entra ID conditional access policies. And calendar availability, so you can federate two different organizations, whether it's your tenants that span commercial and government, or even your partners in a true B2B scenario, to see calendar availability. So what's new is around rich collaboration. So earlier this year in February, we went generally available with the Azure AD fundamental B2B capability. So with cross cloud, that includes external access between commercial and GCC High and other locations that we had. Azure AD support, authenticated application access. Oftentimes we refer to as web client, right? Anything within the web client was supported, such as being able to do SharePoint, OneDrive, guest access. You can click the share button and be able to, share with folks that are both in your tenant as well as commercial and GCC High. The public preview that we came out is production ready. It just means that we're looking for, some feedback from the user community before we call it generally available. At the end of the day, it does include the ability to do team sharing. So that would be adding an external guest user as a member of a team. And those guest users can span commercial and government, as well as looking at meeting identity attestation. So that's authenticated access for meetings. This covers the ability to group chats within teams, share files within teams, and have full capabilities, if you will, within a group of teams. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up for this session today. Looking forward to feedback from the community. You can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm available there, and reply to various instant messages I get on LinkedIn. Of course, you can also reach out to us at Microsoft through your account teams, et cetera. We're super excited to really see CMMC come to life here, and your ability to leverage our cloud service offerings to help you demonstrate compliance with both level 2 and level 3 as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap for the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, for sharing the available technology to help contractors meet CMMC compliance. Microsoft is continuously evolving their technology stack and partnerships to best meet the regulatory demands of CMMC. Partnering with Microsoft to enhance audit-ready solutions to our clients, CyberSheath recognizes Microsoft's expertise and advancement of future-proofing technologies. CyberSheath is a trusted member of Microsoft Intelligence Security Association, Microsoft Cloud Solutions Provider, Microsoft Premier Support Partner, Silver Partner. In addition, CyberSheath has had the privilege of becoming part of a select few official resellers for Microsoft GCC High and Office 365 GCC licensing. Please email us any GCC or GCC High specific questions that you may have regarding your organization.